to Coast Creatives, a podcast for and about working professional artists within the entertainment industry. I'm Joe Funk, and along with my co-host, Torrin Cavens-Flores, we interview actors, directors, photographers, writers, and many, many more. In this episode, we'll be talking with our dear friend, Levi Austin Morris. Originally from Minnesota, like myself, Levi is a writer, director, and actor currently living in Los Angeles. In this episode, we discuss Levi's feature-length horror film, Paralysis. Shot entirely on an iPhone during COVID, Paralysis is playing the festival circuit and won Best Horror Feature Film at the Culver City Film Festival. Levi talks about his creative process, the personal, emotional impact of writing and shooting Paralysis, and the pros and cons of iPhone filmmaking. With all that said, on to our discussion with Levi. How are you doing today, Levi?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm chilling in LA, hiding in my closet.
How has LA been treating you? You've lived there for a hot minute now. How long have you been there?
I moved to LA at the end of 2011, so I have been here for, is that 11 years?
That's 12 years. Nope, 11.
Dang.
11, going on 12.
Almost, yeah. Mm-hmm. September 2023 will be 12. So yeah, 11 years. It's been a journey, that's for sure.
So you're into your second decade in Los Angeles.
Whoa, what a horrible way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave it to Joe.
Thanks,
how are you feeling?
I'm
gonna re-up for another 10.
Yeah, I think I am. I am. I think the first decade was a lot of trying to figure my shit out and find my community and figure out, ways to hustle. Like I did the whole 3 jobs thing for a while, and then thankfully I don't have to do that anymore. So,
very good.
I am definitely in a better place.
Nice. And for a little bit of backstory, both Torrin and I, we both went to college with you at Augsburg University.
Yes.
No longer called Augsburg College.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't go at the same time. Whenever we explain this to people, they're very confused about it.
You want me to explain it?
Explain it, please.
Sure. So I went to Augsburg College, now university, and Torrin and I were in the same AugSem. We were both theater majors, and we hit it off. We became buddies. I also developed an inappropriate crush on Torrin, just because, he's Torrin. We hung out all the time and did everything. And then he went back to Colorado and didn't come back to Augsburg the next year. And that's when you came along, Joe, and I was your AugSem leader.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you guys moved to LA, I introduced you. So you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And now we live in Atlanta and you live in Los Angeles. So it's weird how things work out.
Yeah.
I remember my first introduction to Torrin was when we were doing Life is a Dream.
Did you see that? Wait,
no,
you were in that. Yeah.
So
why would that be your introduction? Did he come to the show?
No. He didn't come to the show, but we were hanging out before the show. This was a play that we were in college, and you were talking about how he does the best impressions, and you got him on the phone to do Christopher Walken for everybody in the green room before our show.
Yes, I did. I do remember that, actually.
So that was my introduction to him, and then with Obscura that we made in Los Angeles, you're like, let's get the Christopher Walken guy.
Yeah.
Let's get him in on this.
Let's get the Christopher Walken guy to do a super dramatic role.
Yeah.
And it worked out.
It worked out.
It did.
So we've been collaborating on theater projects, on film projects we're going into our second decade.
That's a throwback.
Yeah. Levi's like, stop describing it like that.
That one's fine because I've known you guys since I was 20. So that one doesn't hurt me. It's the being in LA for my second.
We're almost halfway through our second decade.
Oh my
collaborations.
Yeah,
we are 15 years.
Yeah,
but we haven't acted together in a long time. You guys, I guess have acted a little bit together in Pride. but you didn't have a lot of scenes that overlap.
We had almost 0 scenes together. I think there was one scene at the diner that we interacted, and I guess we also interacted at the church at the end, the church bake-off, but that was it.
Yeah, and that was how long was that film? This was so explain what this project is.
Okay, Pride of Indiana was a film that I started writing very shortly after I think Arizona was starting to consider Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which basically allowed businesses to refuse business to LGBT clients based off their religious beliefs. And then a number of other states were starting to pass that. And it happened to be, as I was writing it, that Indiana did. Mike Pence, that he was the governor who signed that into law, and then shortly thereafter became our vice president. But so I ended up basing the film in Indiana. And it was just a small town, very small town in the Midwest where a celebrity who hailed from there went back and tried to change the minds and hearts, and we all played small towners or the celebrities. Torrin and I were the small town people, so
it was a lot of fun too.
It was a fun one. It was. I will say I really enjoyed that rehearsal process, because we really did rehearse that like a play, and we found sort of the jokes that worked and the things that didn't. So that was a lot of fun in that process, and I would like to do another thing like that at some point.
Another in style, in like improv mockumentary style?
Yeah, I think so. I do. I've always had affection for that style. Like Christopher Guest is one of my favorite filmmakers. So I really, really enjoy that style. I think it has to be the right project though.
Sure.
But yeah, that's something that I would like to explore again, where it's like improv based, and I'll be a little more specific with certain things. It was a crazy learning experience for sure. That process, that project.
Yeah. And every project, I'm assuming.
Oh, Jesus. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And what was the runtime of Pride? Do you remember?
I want to say it was like 52 minutes or something, or 57 minutes.
Okay.
So it was not even an hour.
So my question for you, which will lead into Paralysis, is you are the only one of us that is not intimidated with the idea of making a feature-length project. I have always leaned towards how short can I get this? Can I get it 10 minutes, 5 minutes? How short can I get these scripts? And you expand these ideas out. Why are you not intimidated by making a 60, 90-minute project?
I'm going to say it's honestly probably naive. I think I just have like a story that I want to tell, and I feel like I need to tell that story to its full potential and its full degree, and like get everything out that I need to about that story. And so I don't really pay attention to the time or the length of the film while I'm writing it. And then in the editing process or the rewriting process, it will either become longer or shorter. And so like with Paralysis, the first script I think was 52 pages. And so it was not a feature length, and then it went through like 6 or 7 drafts, and I think I got it up to like 98 pages.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I was thinking even that 50 pager could turn into how long is it? Is it 90 minutes? 80 minutes?
It's a little over. It's an hour and 47.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, like even something like that could turn into a 50-page script. I could see it turning into a film that long, just because it's not a dialogue heavy project.
Yeah, that's actually something that like I knew when I was writing it, that like the intention was for it to be a slow burn. And for like to let certain moments live out. And I will say in the editing process that changed pretty dramatically, because it was originally a 2 hour and 2 minute film, and I was like, this baby needs to be cut. So yeah.
Well, let's have that be our formal introduction into Paralysis. Tell us a little bit about this project.
Sure. Paralysis is about a woman who is suffering from sleep paralysis, and she sort of learns through the film that it is actually connected to sort of family trauma and grief that she has not yet worked through or overcome. And so, yeah, it's spooky and it's a slow burn, but it's a lot of fun, I hope.
Yeah, it was wonderful. We watched it for the first time yesterday, and we were all engaged. It was me, Torin, and my wife Emmy. We all watched it together.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
It was great. It really was. Engaged like the whole time, and I appreciate a good slow burn horror movie as well. And the type of horror movie that it was, I like to write and make myself, like a horror drama. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was really engaged. And
excellent.
Yeah, it was excellent. I suffered from sleep paralysis as a kid.
I did not know that, actually. Yeah. So I do have a question. Because I know some people, because I researched this topic a shit ton before actually writing it. And there are people who see an entity, and then there are people who just experience the paralysis. So did you see something?
Yeah. So I would wake up, not be able to move, almost feel like something was holding me down. Yeah. And would see this like dark figure above me or creeping up on me from the feet up. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's excellent, but I mean, I guess I'm just really fascinated with this topic now. So, but like what most people do, I guess, experience is either a shadow figure, and a lot of people see like a man in a hat, or they see what we explore in our film, which is the old hag, and it's a woman with gray skin and white eyes. So yeah. So
and the way you're talking about it, I'm guessing you've never experienced sleep paralysis.
I actually have, but I haven't seen an entity. And it was when I was a kid, and I didn't understand at the time that that's what it was. Yeah. But I remember waking up and thinking, why can I not move my arm? And I had a bunk bed, and I was on the top bunk and my sister was on the bottom bunk. And I turned my head toward the mirror that was on the wall just opposite the bed. And I remember seeing my face change, and it terrified me. So I closed my eyes, because it happened in the morning. It was not at night, when I experienced it. But that was it for me. Whereas Allison, my lead actress, is a regular sleep paralysis sufferer. And then a number of other people who worked on the project also suffered from sleep paralysis. So it was nice to have that as well.
That's crazy. I didn't know that many people have these experiences. I've never had anything like that.
Yeah, they made a documentary about it.
Yeah. I've experienced Hat Man before. But that was when I was a child, and it's been a long time. And I have a weird fascination with the supernatural, so I always thought it was cool. Yeah, I was never too spooked out by it. I was like, "Oh, there he is."
Okay, but so I mean, that's paralysis then. So you did experience it. You just happened to.
I didn't have the paralysis. I just would wake up and there was that guy in the corner of the room.
And then that is terrifying.
I would go back to bed.
Oh, hey, sir, I'm gonna go back to bed.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Let's talk about the inception of this film. How did you come up with this idea? And this was developed during COVID, or were the seeds planted before COVID?
So during COVID, Allison, the lead actress, she was staying at her parents' house in Irvine. And so I was living in her house. And so, it really did start while I was living in her house. And part of it was that I was dealing with sort of my own isolation and feelings of isolation during quarantine. I was feeling very disconnected from a lot of people, and I had just started therapy in November 2020. And so I started writing this in October. Was it October? I think I had the idea in October of 2020, because we had just done a Zoom play that I had written with a bunch of actors. And so we did that to entertain the masses during COVID. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I really want to write this horror film. And I knew, like, I had just discovered, and Joe, you can relate to this, because we share a affinity for Sarah Bareilles, but I had just discovered a new Sarah Bareilles song called Simple and True. And it had come out, I think, for a show that she was writing on. And it was like a really sad melody about like losing a loved one. And then it like climaxed in this really beautiful way. And music has always been like this massive inspiration to me. So in dealing with my own isolation and then listening to that song, I was like, oh my God, like I had the image of sort of a sister finding her brother passed in the basement. And I used that as sort of the foundation of the story and built the story around that. Yeah. And it ended up being also incredibly therapeutic because the things I was talking about in therapy, I ended up writing into my script. So yeah.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful how you can use your art, use your creativity as a supplement to your therapy. And even you've told us before that it's a very emotional, personal project to you, and I think that you could feel that even if we didn't know you. It definitely,
that is the goal.
It definitely comes through.
Good. Hopefully not too heavy-handed, because I do really hate when things are melodramatic, and I'm always like, as a filmmaker, that's just something that I always worry about, is I'm a little heavy-handed.
It was not at all heavy-handed.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
You're
made my day. Great.
It's very light-handed.
Yeah. Oh, it's like a breeze.
Mm-hmm. So, Levi, in your film, you play the character Nicky, the brother who is passed away. And
Spoiler.
You spoiled it earlier.
It's really not.
You're good. I did spoil it earlier. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, fine. And your sister finds a notebook of drawings that you've done. And I know that you're a great artist, great painter. Did you do all those drawings yourself?
I did.
Nice.
I and thank you for that compliment. That's very sweet. I knew, like, I've sort of had, this skill that it's not my main passion, but I enjoy doing it enough that I've wanted to incorporate it into a film for a while. And I've written other things that I've not actually produced. And then this one, it actually fit, I think, the most seamlessly into the story. So, it was just something that I wanted to incorporate. And then when I was actually doing the drawings, I will say, and the paintings, I wish I had committed to the charcoal in the book. And that's just my own sort of like, watching the film, I'm like, man, I should have committed to that style, the messier style in the book. But that's just because I am my own worst critic and I am constantly correcting myself. So
you are your own worst critic. It's true. But that's funny. I was thinking about that as well. I was like, man, he should have stuck with the charcoal.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. I was like, because I just said that, so I feel that way.
No, I did think about it though. The different styles and different mediums that you used, yeah. I thought it just helped the story and helped illustrate the mindset of this character. Okay. And it was because they're all different in their own way, and it's I don't know. I really liked that. And
thank you. I received that.
My question with the illustrations is, how did the illustrations create a visual style for the film? Because and on some of those, it's like a 1-for-1 image of what you would see. You have that great shot at the bottom of the stairs looking up at her silhouette that you use in the posters, and that image is also in the notebook. Did you use the drawings as a way to sort of get a sense of the visual style that you wanted to go for?
I mean, I think with the drawings in particular, I was really just going into the mindset of that character. I wasn't really thinking about the visual style as much as like, I had written and we cut from the film, but specifically my character, when he is working on the notebook or the drawings, that's when he is tweaked out of his mind.
Okay, that's very cool. Let's talk about the production of this.
Sure.
One of the things that really fascinate me, two things really fascinate me about the production of this. The first thing is that it was entirely shot on an iPhone.
Yes.
Correct?
Two iPhones.
Two iPhones. And you were also shooting during COVID, during the height of COVID, where there were still lockdowns happening and masked up, and the world was a very different place back then. What was it like shooting during COVID?
So when I actually started writing the script, it was during COVID, like I said a little bit ago. And I specifically wrote it knowing that we might go into production during COVID, because I didn't know how long COVID was going to last. So I wrote as small as I could, as far as like locations, as far as actors, and crew. I was constantly thinking about those things as I was writing, and I was like, we're going to have a tiny frickin', team. So how can I make this work? And so one of the things, as I was writing, I would literally walk around Allison's house and look at the rooms and the angles and stuff. So I had the shots in mind as I was writing the script, which may be to my detriment in some ways, but in other ways, I think it worked really well in the final product. Like the mirror scare in Allison's room, for instance, that was, I was sitting in her bed writing, and I happened to look up in that mirror and I could see that I could see in the bathroom, and I was like, that's a cool scare. And so that ended up, happening. And I will say we lucked out because we filmed in July of 2021, and they just lifted sort of the regulations, the COVID regulations, I think at the end of June. And then we went back into a lockdown, I think in August. So we literally got our window, and it happened to work out that we could, film. And we did have because this is a SAG project, we did have specific things we had to do, like COVID protocol, and whatnot. But, yeah.
And
it was hard though. I will say it was hard.
How big was the crew?
I think it was way too small. I wore way too many hats.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. I think, on our biggest day, we had 8 people on our crew.
Okay. And
on our smallest day, I think we had 3. So it was a lot. But, I happen to know a lot of people who are willing to play and come in and get their hands dirty and whatnot. So I could throw a task at them and then switch their task for the next scene, and they adapted really well. So
that's amazing. That's great. And now let's talk a little bit about iPhone filmmaking.
Yeah.
Why did you go with an iPhone?
So I've actually been filming on an iPhone since 2014 because it was my first access to a camera. I shot my first short film in 2014, which you helped on. Thank you, Joe. I don't know if you remember that, but you explained to me how to do lighting at that time.
On an iPhone?
In general. I had never lit a scene before.
This is the project with Emmy.
Yes, with Emmy.
Yes.
Yeah, with Joe's wife, Emmy. Yeah. And so, you sort of helped me figure out lighting for that. And it's looking back, I've grown exponentially. I also will say I researched a shit ton before filming Paralysis for lighting, because I knew this is a low light situation. I'm filming on an iPhone. The footage could become grainy. So I need to so there was a lot of research that went into it, as well as just how to get the atmosphere and stuff that I wanted in the project. But yeah, so I've been doing it since 2014, and it just it was at the end of COVID, or, not even the end of COVID, in the middle of COVID, that it just seemed the most doable at the time. And so, I knew I wanted to get some, I owned a gimbal, but I wanted to get a better gimbal. I wanted to get lenses, because there are certain lenses you can attach to an iPhone to improve the quality. And so we needed to raise the money. And so we shot our concept trailer, and we raised the money from there. And then we were able to afford all of the things that I had meticulously figured out that we needed. So yeah.
Nice. And now that you've made a full feature film on it, what are the biggest pros and the biggest cons of doing this?
The pros is that you can have 2 on hand. I had we filmed on my phone, which is an iPhone 11 Pro, and we filmed on my friend Emerson's phone, which is an iPhone 12 Pro. And so having we could set up 2 gimbals with 2 cameras and 2 different lenses. So we could swap that out really quickly. It was really nice as far as moving quickly, as opposed to, resetting everything and so that is a pro. Also, the size of the camera is a pro, because there are a few places that we do film outside. And although we did have our zoom and our microphones, our boom and our lavs and whatnot, it does look less suspicious than carrying around a massive camera. Just carrying around an iPhone. Yeah. And then also one thing when I wrote the basement sequence, I was actually afraid of Allison's basement, so I never went down there. And so I didn't take into account the actual size of her basement. And so it's a crawl space, basically. It's not a crawl space, but it's very small. And so
you worked your movie magic with it and made it look like a much bigger space than it is.
Excellent. I'm grateful for that. And I will say that the size of the camera we could not have done that on any other camera.
Yeah.
This, in particular, the basement, because of how tiny that space is. So
yeah. So those are the biggest pros. What after a full feature, what do you have as cons? What I'm sure you discovered a bunch of new cons while you were making this that you didn't even anticipate beforehand.
I mean, I think like there's so many cons. Like I enjoyed the experience, and I will probably do another iPhone movie at some point, but I am going to take a break from iPhone filmmaking probably, just for a little while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say cons are like, you run out of space so quickly, especially because like so I wanted to shoot in 4K, but there was no way, because you can do that with, iPhones, but also like certain apps give you access to certain things like, shutter speed and whatnot, and focus, and, you can rack focus and all that, which is cool, but it takes up so much space on the phone that that was a nightmare. That like I felt like every scene, like we would do a take and get multiple takes, and then we'd have to drop footage, which was also the benefit, I will say, of having two phones on hand, because we could be dropping footage on one and filming on the other.
Yeah.
But it was still like that was frustrating. And then I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier about the lighting, like there were certain moments that I knew I was pushing it, and I knew that the footage might look a little grainy because of the lighting situation. Like, it was very complicated in that, like, I tried to keep the ISO as low as possible, but sometimes you have to bring that up, and then you get a little more noise in your footage, and it sucks. So yeah.
No, those are that's what I expected. Did you have any overheating issues?
No, because we had the two phones that if we sensed one was starting to overheat, but that was a problem that I have had in past mobile phone films.
Really? Yeah.
That we thankfully did not have on this one. So
was this I
do have one other con. Sorry. This is a massive one. So the worst fucking con was that so iPhones are this big, like they're not very big. You can connect to a monitor, like you can it's like a remote connection you can do through that app, and you can see it, but like we didn't have a monitor, so we were getting the focus on this big of a screen. And like there's like little tools within the app that like you can get the outline, and you can see, where the guiding lines are as far as like that's in focus and that is not.
Yeah.
But the problem was that sometimes it looked like it was, and then it wasn't. So there was because the screen is this big.
Yeah.
So there was one scene that we almost had to film 3 times. We did film twice. It's the scene when we are outside walking just before I disappear and she runs through the woods looking for me.
Yeah.
And Emerson was the DP at that moment, and he had a really hard time getting in focus. And so like when I looked at the footage at the end of the day, I was like, none of this is in focus. We have to reshoot this entire thing. And so when we reshot it, I was like very adamant about like, let me do this, he also did, like we tried really hard, and there's still footage that was not in focus. And it's because specifically in those moments, where we can control the lighting in the house, it's a lot easier to see, but when you're outside, everything is like lit. And so it's really hard to like get that focus. And so, so that was a nightmare, and I never would do that again.
So what were the, you ditched the idea of shooting in 4K. What were the technical specs you eventually went with?
We shot in 2K, and then that gave us a little bit of room to cut in if we needed to on footage, to push in a little bit. So ultimately, the film is and disappointingly for myself, but the film is just HD. It's 1980 over or 1920 over 1080.
Yeah.
So it's not 2K. Yeah.
And color profile, you were shooting log.
Yes. Yeah. I shot log, which is something I like in the cinematic pack that I had purchased with my app. It gives you that access, and honestly, that is so much fun to play with.
Right?
When you're actually coloring, it is a lot of fun. So,
yeah. Well, we haven't talked about it much because this has kind of been like a Atlanta activity for me. But I've gotten really into color grading in the last 3 years, and it is a lot of fun. What you can do with this footage, but you also learn that there's this misconception that you can do anything with it. Mm-hmm. And you can change anything in post, and you can like really be playing with the colors, and you can to an extent, but a lot of it also shapes your view set as a director and a cinematographer moving forward. You're like, okay, now I know how I need to light it to get that result later on. And I'm sure that's something that you learned as well.
Or that I will be learning on the next project. It's like, yes, like throughout that project, but I was not coloring until long past production. So I did not I wasn't doing it throughout the process. That I think it'll be more exciting moving forward with those things in mind. But I do think, it was mostly about, making sure that my highlights aren't overexposed and my shadows aren't too dark, that I'll be able to play in that,
Yeah.
Just a little nugget of advice for actors and filmmakers out there, new and veteran. If you go into your next project with the thought of, we'll fix it in post, that's going to make you a shitty artist. Yeah. You can do a lot in post, but if you just have that mindset, you're going to stop yourself from learning anything.
And I will say that did stop us in some ways, because we also did have reshoots, and there were certain things we did reshoot because of mistakes made on set, so yeah.
Let's see. Oh, I'm curious. What did you color grade on? What'd you edit with?
So I edited on Final Cut, but I also there's a really cool app as well. So I did most of my color grading in an app, and then I altered it more on Final Cut. The app that I used was Luma Touch, and so you can upload a bunch of LUTs in there, which is fun to play with, but you can also just create your own, which is I ended up doing more often than not. So maybe I would start with a base of something and then I'd build off of that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun because you get to play with, everything. So
that is so cool.
Yeah.
I love it, man.
And that was something I had researched as well ahead of time. That I think people should look into. That's a cool app. That one is one that I still am a fan of.
Yeah. What apps you recommend, apps you do not recommend for iPhone filmmakers?
Sure. So the one we filmed on was Filmic Pro. I owned that app since 2014. It was an incredible app. And then they were constantly updating it. So when I first bought it, they didn't have the access to, filming in log. And then over the years, it was something that they developed, and, and then you could buy that add-on, and you could control the ISO, you could control I talked a little bit about that earlier, but, and then, they recently sold to a new parent company. And so they have changed their service, and it's now a subscription service, and they're not honoring their customers. So all of us would have to now join a subscription, which is kind of shitty. And then, the app is just the actual app, what's the word I'm looking for? The screen has changed so much that I feel like I'm going to have to learn a whole new app. So at this point, I just want to move on from Filmic Pro, because most people who have been filming with Filmic Pro are kind of jumping ship.
Yeah.
So that one I'm not as in love with, but God, it used to be a great app. And I got them so much money. I encouraged so many people to buy that app over the years. Luma Touch is an incredible app. I use that one for color grading. And then just fixed it, or not fixed it, but altered it more once I got it into Final Cut. I think those are really the only two apps I used. And then I used Final Cut for editing, and then we hired a sound mixer, so I didn't do the sound.
Did you do a lot of ADR in post-production?
More than I would have liked to. I hate ADR.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that's something that I struggled with. And when I watched the film, I personally still see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, ADR is just very difficult to do. But yeah, we did do some ADR specifically for the outside scenes, just because there's so many elements that you can't control. And when I say the outside scenes, I mean the outside scenes that are not like the backyard. Those were fine. The audio was fine. It was the ones walking on the street. It was the ones in the forest, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of ADR there. And so like, I will say it's kind of fun sort of building the atmosphere in post, like in the ADR, building the world, the sound of the world. But, it is not a job that I enjoy that much. So I will be hiring out for that for future. Like I did have somebody help me with that one a lot. 2 people actually. And so that was nice, but yeah.
So my next question for you is, it's about limitations as a filmmaker, and there's many examples of how limitations within budget, within in your case with COVID, can really bring about some amazing results. Did you view it that way? Did you view this as a weird blessing in disguise? Did you embrace like, okay, how am I going to tell this whole story essentially in one small location? Mm-hmm. Did you embrace that from the start?
Yeah. I think, I mean, like I had said earlier, I wrote this knowing full well that it might go into production during COVID. So I wrote it as small as possible. And then like, you know, I did my shot list and my storyboard, and everything, but like, it is exciting with those limitations sometimes because it's like, I don't have to always follow rules. I can sort of do my own thing. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then we'll cut it, you know? And so like, there were certain things and certain shots that I think like were probably more technically difficult than what we were prepared, you know, to do. But I think we pulled them off to a certain degree. One in particular that I would say is there's that shot in her room where it 360 rotation.
Yeah.
I love that shot. And I was super excited when I wrote that shot. And we set, and this is so stupid, but like, this is low budget filmmaking, my friend. We set, we put the camera into a cage so that it would not move at all. And then we secured that onto a tripod. And then we put the tripod on a Lazy Susan, which, yeah. And we slowly rotated.
Yeah. I've done that before. I've done that, putting it on top of like putting a tiny tripod on top of a record player.
Love that. Yeah. Yeah. But like those moments are super exciting when they work, you know? And so like when we watched the footage back, we were all like, okay, no, this is good. So like it's exciting when those moments happen. And so like there were moments like that throughout, I think that like we'd get excited about. Like, I mean, even like the moment in the basement when she finds me and then the camera sort of pushes into my face and goes up.
Yeah.
I love that shot. And that was, that's not what I storyboarded. That's not what I wrote on my shot list. It's just what I had written wasn't working, because the space is so small. And so Emerson was DP at that moment and just decided to try something. And when I saw the footage, I'm like, yes, this is what I want to do. So we incorporated that then in another moment as well in the film because I liked that shot so much. That was actually on our first day of filming. And then later on in the seance scene, we have a similar shot with Lisa Gay. That's the woman, the actress who plays Anissa.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, you say this is low budget filmmaking, friends, but I mean, big budget movies have to use that kind of shit too, you know, like to make something happen, you do what you have to do, you know, like, I mean, like Alien is like a great example of like, you know, little things that they had to do to make an effect, you know, and I mean, like in Aliens, the queen alien was just like a bunch of trash bags.
I love
like,
that.
Yeah. I mean, of course there was more to it, but like, yeah, just basically like a bunch of trash bags. So yeah, you say low budget filmmaking, sure.
That's true.
But
you
also
are right.
you just do what you got to do to get the shot, man.
Yeah. And I will say, I did plan ahead for a lot of these things, like in my research, like and you're right, because like I was watching, I think it was, Wes Anderson behind the scenes, and like that train sequence in Grand Budapest is literally two guys on a trolley. And then like they sort of created a facade that looked like, the wall of the train. And I'm like, Jesus, that's amazing. So like, yeah, it's just really creative ways so that you can get the shot that you need, you know?
And that's the thing too. Like if you have all these things at your fingertips, I mean, that's great, you know, to have money to like use all these different tools.
I've heard it's amazing.
Wouldn't that be nice?
But, you know, on the other hand as well, like there are those moments that are just so fulfilling when you have to get creative.
Yes.
And then, you know, like you with the Lazy Susan thing, you see the footage and you're like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was super exciting.
Forces you to get creative. And yeah, like speaking of that, I was really impressed by the makeup for all of this.
Awesome.
Yeah, so tell us about the makeup for these demon characters, because
sure,
chef's kiss.
Excellent. So for our main demon, like that we sort of follow for most of the film, which is the old hag, I had researched a bunch about demons and specific demons, and I will say the demon that she plays is a real demon. Like it is a demon that does feed off of people's emotions. And so I was trying to find physical characteristics, because some demons, when you're researching them, it does say, oh, you know, they have a crown of thorns, or, you know, whatever. And there was no physical characteristics to this one. So I sort of played around with the idea, because as you discover in our film, it is a bit of a shapeshifter, this demon. And so I liked, there's a couple of thoughts here, but I liked the idea of sort of creating something that could then be, ribbon throughout all of them. So like we have sort of the veins around her eyes and stuff when she is the old hag. And then, you see me and another character sort of in sort of demon form. And we also have veins, and we have the black fingertips. And so it's like sort of ribboning those small things throughout. And then once it's revealed his true form, which is the final one, he has the veins, but, I actually found that mask on Etsy. There's an Etsy artist in the UK, and I knew, because he feeds off of emotions, I wanted his eyes covered, and so I searched for blind masks. And I fell in love with that one, and I asked them, you know, I'm shooting a very low budget film. Is it okay if I purchase this and we use it in the film? And they said absolutely. So and then we hired a makeup artist. I actually designed the makeup of the hag before we hired the makeup artist, because we shot our concept trailer. And so I did our hag's makeup for the concept trailer. And then when I hired the makeup artist, she said she really liked what I did, and she was going to just build on it. And so she added some prosthetics that made her eyes more sunken in, as well as a few other things. And she used the correct materials, as opposed to like, I'm using food coloring to create black in the mouth. And she's like, no, we're not going to do that. So
food coloring and spray paint.
Yeah. No, it was Snazaroo body paint. So, but it worked really well. But no, so she came in and she did the makeup for the actual, filming the production. And she and I had talked for a little bit about what I wanted from the male demon. And we sort of decided, because he's feeding off of, you know, these people, we like the idea that it sort of, the focus ends up being, besides his mask, we also see that trail of blood coming down. And so it draws more attention to the idea of his mouth. So that was something that we sort of came up with together. So, yeah.
And Joe, was it you or Emmy who asked if that beard was real or not?
That was me.
Oh, it's a real beard. That was his beard. Yeah.
For those of you listening, the demon at the end he's got a big old bushy beard.
Yes, he does. And he can grow that thing. My God.
Yeah.
At one point I was like, you need to trim it. It's getting too much. So
yeah. Oh, good on him. Where was most of the money allocated during the production?
During production or post-production?
All together.
Okay.
How was it divvied up?
So we had a lot of it went to the equipment because we owned we owned our cameras, but we like some of the gimbals we needed to get. We needed to get lavs, we needed to get the lenses that attach. We needed to get the cages. So there was a lot of equipment we needed. We needed to bulk up our light kit because our light kit was at that point just softboxes and the LED panels that we used during Pride. And so we got a lot more flexible lighting. We got like some cubes that we could just, tape or place in certain spots. Gels, the what do you call it? Crafty, sorry. Food every day. Like we budgeted $100 every day for the 8 people on set. So for meals, because we were on set for 14 hours every day. And then I'm trying to think. I could pull up the sheet, but there's a bunch of other areas. That's just all I can think of off the top of my head. And then in post, it went to and our makeup artist. So we had to hire. She was, she was great in that she gave us a deal because it was a very low budget film. But she was our most expensive expense on production.
Okay.
And then in post production, it was like composer, festival entry fees. I hired a sound mixer, and that was expensive. And then we hired VFX people, and we used very little of the footage that was VFX.
I was going to say, what was the VFX shots?
So the mask it blends into his face better now. Like in the original, it's very obvious that it's a mask.
Oh.
So our VFX artist went in and sort of created these tendrils that like forms into his face more. And then our makeup artist, there are areas that it was a little more sparse as far as the makeup. And so he went in and he created that vein effect a little more. And then there's the shot where he is, where they the seance on the phone, that's a VFX shot. The one where she scrolls through and then you see him a little bit faint behind her choking choking the
sure.
Yeah, so that's a VFX shot. And then there was one day of reshoots where we made Bethany. I added a scare that I liked, and so I did Bethany's makeup on the day of reshoots because we were not going to do another full day of pay for the makeup artist for one shot, and so I did her makeup. It's the shot where she's kind of peeking around the corner, like. The light turns on or turns off, and then Allison runs, and then the hag is sort of peeking around the corner and then goes behind the wall. Mm-hmm. She no longer had her contacts, so he had to CGI do that. So it was stuff like that. But
I didn't notice any of it.
Things.
So the VFX artist did a very good job.
Yes, he did.
Yes. Bravo there. And now into practical effects. I had a question about. It's a seemingly simple thing that people wouldn't really think about. The doors opening and closing like by themselves.
Sure.
That can be a simple, technique of like putting, like a string on the bottom of the door and like having someone there. But there was one shot where door is totally closed. It opens by itself, but the handle turns and opens. And there's, of course there's nobody, there's not like a stagehand like doing it and running away. How'd you do that?
Lighting. That is lighting because that is there is a stagehand there running away.
That's amazing.
So like the way that we lit that, it was bright enough in the room and it was dark enough out in the hall that like when even in the shot, like you could not see the effect or the hand. So like most of those were somebody either opening the door or it was like sometimes people were at the very bottom of the door and like so somebody would like just do the handle and then somebody would push slightly on the bottom of the door so that like the hand wasn't seen or something. And then there's one where Allison is running through the house. She's running to the back door and she opens the door and then it slams shut on her. And that was Allison using her foot to slam it shut out of frame. So she would open the door and then the foot would slam the door shut out of frame. So yeah.
That's fantastic.
But it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, it all worked. Yeah.
I think my favorite, I have to shout out myself for this one shot just because I love it so much. But the one where it starts as the sort of nanny, and she walks through the hallway, and then it becomes the hag, and then she runs through the hallway, and it becomes the male version of the demon. That is literally just like set it on a tripod, cut out the moment where the one actress goes, and but I think it looks so cool. So
yeah. Oh, I love that moment.
Yeah,
that was really nice.
It does look cool.
I want you to talk a little bit about the editing process for you. So you were the sole editor for this.
Yes, I was.
And the sole writer for this.
Yes, I was.
A lot of hats. A lot of hats, like you said.
What was the original cut? How many versions of this did you have? Did you show it to test audiences and get feedback? How many versions did you go through until we got to this point?
I don't know. So many. So I started like the editing process, and I'm a little obsessive, which you guys are aware of. Mm-hmm. So like I would edit a scene and then I'd begin editing. And I will say I started editing with the scenes I was most afraid wouldn't work, because I needed to know that they were going to work. So the first scene that I edited was actually the scene where Anissa, the mirror sequence, and she walks into the hall, and that whole sequence, because that was all night stuff. And I needed to know that the footage was going to work. And so I edited that, and then I'd move on to the next scene after that. And every time that I moved on to the next scene after that, I would watch that scene again. So it was like I've watched that scene way too many times. But by doing that, I also was constantly fidgeting with it and altering it. And so like once it found its pace, I was like, this feels right, So the editing process took a really long time, and I think I finally had a rough cut. God, when did I have a rough cut? Probably end of April. I had a rough cut, and I showed it just to my production team, and they had some notes, like, things that like maybe were confusing with the story. Is there a way to clear this up? Do we need to do reshoots? So it was kind of a discussion, and then I would make the final decision. So our final cut ended up being, it started at 2 hours and 2 minutes was the rough cut. I cut it down to 1:59. And I was like, this is it. This is the one,
Cut 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Yeah,
you felt proud of those 3 minutes.
Whoa.
I was so proud of those 3 minutes. And then we submitted to Screamfest because they allow works in progress submissions, and we were rejected. Do you guys know Allison's friend, Tony Bravo?
No.
Okay. Tony Bravo is a filmmaker. He loves horror. And he has been super supportive through the process, and he was like, I'd love to see it, and so like I sent him a screener, the hour 57 screener, and he was like, dude, like you have some really incredible moments in this is a great film, but I think like you could make this stronger. Like he said, everything that you don't like, tell me about it. And so I told him all the things that I don't like, that I didn't like in that cut. And he said, you could literally cut all of those and you still have the film. And so I did. I went back in and I cut all of them. And then I also made some stylistic choices that were different from the previous cut, specifically in the dream sequences, because I wanted them to feel a little more dreamy. They used to be very like chronological, like she's dreaming and now we're gonna watch the story happen. And then so I started to like just stylistically add, like there's like the moments where it's kind of fading in and out of the dream, and then the moments of like the layered effect. And I in my writing I can be very on the nose, so I cut any lines that I was like, this is too on the nose, and it made for a much better experience, I think, for everybody, because everybody who has seen it now is like, the pace is good, it flows really well, and yeah. So
I've also written and directed a slow burn horror film that is a very personal project, and I know from that experience, mine was much shorter. I don't know how long mine was. Maybe 15 minutes.
20.
20.
Was it 20?
It was like 22.
I remember.
With that project, it's so hard for me, it was so hard to make cuts because it was something that was personal. Sure. And there's a lot in the silence and the small beats that most people are not going to pick up on, but it's really impactful and important to you and to your story. And and a lot of it was for me about gauging how many of those moments were actually reading to anybody else. And if they weren't, I did have to get to that point where I was like, well, then I have to let go of my own emotions towards this beat and get rid of that. Did you have the same experience?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was absolutely where it was just like, I feel very connected to this moment or something, but it was like, it's not, nobody else is going to notice this, like, and so it like there in particular, most of the cuts that ended up happening in that, from the 2 hours and 2 minutes down to hour 47 were in the first half. That's where like she lived in her grief for quite a while to the point that like that was most of the comments, or when people had comments was like, oh, it feels like, this goes on for a long time. So like it was that was for me though. That was like, I think it was sort of me trying to like go through my own emotions, I guess, in that, but I realized that like it needed to be cut, and certain ones I did leave in. Like there are certain moments that like I personally was really connected to, and some people who have seen the project also are connected to those, which is why I felt like it was okay to leave those in. So,
and you recently premiered at the Culver City Film Festival?
Yes, the Culver City Film Festival,
and I know
on December 8th.
It went amazing. You had a great time with it. My first question is, it was shot in an iPhone, but you've never seen it blown up to that size.
I was so nervous.
How was it?
I was so nervous about that. And honest to God, it was such a relief. It looked incredible. Like it really did. And granted, I will say like it cost us a lot of money. We had to get the DCP, and that's where some of the funding also went. Cause like when you're in a lot of these festivals, you have to get the digital cinema package. And I am not equipped at this point. I know a lot of filmmakers can make their own. I don't know how to do that. And I've already worn too many hats that I didn't want to do that. So we did just pay for it, but it looked so good. Like there were a couple of things that I would still tweak just because I am who I am, and the way it looks on like a TV screen or on a computer screen or on a phone is slightly different. So there's like a couple of the night scenes that I think look a little bit too bright. And honestly, I can only think of one. It's the one where the bedroom door opens when Lisa Gay, just right after the mirror sequence, and that bedroom door opens, and then she turns and walks out into the hall. That shot, I think, looks too bright, but everything else looked really good. So, it was an incredible relief to have that, to see that, and That's to amazing. Feel like, okay, my work is not shit. So yeah.
Woo! Yeah. Pop the champagne.
Yeah. It was a very cool moment. So yeah. And then just hearing other people's reactions to it, like, because earlier in the day I had seen a couple of films at the festival, and they unfortunately had smaller audiences, but it was really timing, like their slots, and the fact that we got an 8 p.m. slot worked so well for us because we ended up
huge.
Like. It was so cool because I was so nervous that it was just going to be our team, and it ended up being so many more people that I didn't know.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's great. I've always been much too terrified to watch one of my films when they're in a festival. I will purposefully, Torrance seen this, I will walk out and just like, I'll come back in 20 minutes. And
I used the bathroom twice.
Strategically, I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, I did need to use the bathroom, but I think my body knew that I also needed to exit in those moments. So
what always scared me was something that I thought would be really cool, and then what if, like, even if it's just one person laughing at one thing, there's like, what if they saw something that I didn't see, or they interpret a line differently? Yeah, I know that I would think about that for forever. Yes. That would follow me in those moments. I'm the same way. Yeah.
And I will say, so this is my first time watching it with an audience. And there were reactions that I wasn't expecting. Mostly there was a moment that somebody laughed, and it was a scary moment, and I was like, oh no, like, is that funny? But I was recently informed by the person who was sitting next to that person that it was a nervous laughter. So I was like, okay, good. Because like, I was like, is this not an effective moment? So yeah.
No, I understand that. Like, I'll watch a scary movie and like a scare will be so good or something like that, and I will just crack up. Like in Hereditary, when the little girl gets her head lopped off, I fucking just cracking up, but not in like a that was so stupid kind of way. Like, holy shit, that just happened. I love movies kind of way.
It 100%. Yeah. And in that movie in particular, because I watched that after it was out, like I didn't see that in the theater. I actually rewound it to rewatch that because I was like, did that seriously just happen? So like,
great moment. So for this movie, but not just for this movie, for you in general, we want to know what films and filmmakers inspire you.
Sure. I would say, building off what you were saying earlier, where like horror that also has drama elements. Like I think I am drawn to filmmakers who really do incorporate the emotional story layered on top of like whatever they're hoping to achieve, you know? So like Taika Waititi with Jojo Rabbit, it's a hilarious movie, but there is so much tragedy in that movie, you know? Like it's like, that is an emotional gut punch. I think Hereditary is another really good one where it's like, it's a family drama, but there's like layers there, you know? The Babadook is probably one of my favorite horror movies in the last decade. And I think that's an incredible movie at also dealing with grief, similar to Paralysis. So like, I really like when a director can layer sort of themes in an effective way. I also think Mike Flanagan, who does like The Haunting of Hill House, you know, he did Hush, he did one of the Annabelle, I think he did The Creation, one of the only good Annabelle movies. I feel like he does a really good job at sort of layering emotion on top of horror. So yeah, I mean, if we're talking horror, I guess, even though Jojo Rabbit is not horror, but like, yeah.
And now that you've made such a personal project to you, what do you want to do next? Do you want to do something that's around this level, or do you want to take a break and do another Pride, do another comedy, do something a little bit lighter, and then you can jump back into this? What do you feel and you want to do next?
So what I have found through all of this and talked about in therapy is that I'm pretty self-aware, which I think is not everybody is. So like, I'm aware of what I'm going through when I'm going through it. And it's incredibly, and it always has been because of how I grew up and where I grew up and sort of my own traumas and whatnot. That it's been helpful to sort of funnel my whatever I'm going through the arts. So I do realize that every project I create is going to be personal no matter what. But the next one is a comedy. I already know what the project is. It's a horror comedy. It is about Minnesota. It's Minnesota moms killing their husbands. It starts as like one woman kills her husband and then she loves the freedom of it and inspires all of her friends to do it as well. And so it's like a horror comedy that's going to be just a bunch of Minnesota moms killing their husbands, you know?
I love that. Are you gonna film in Minnesota?
I would love to. I did say I will never make a film on this budget again. So like the goal is like to use this film as sort of a negotiation thing to get more funding so that we can. I would love to film in Minnesota though.
Are you gonna do like a period piece, like set it in the 80s or 90s or something? Because you say Minnesota moms, and I'm just picturing like perms and like high-waisted
I do
mom
really
jeans.
love, like, because I grew up in the 90s in Minnesota, so I do kind of feel like it should be the 90s. And I will say there is a personal element of this, of Minnesota moms killing their husbands. But I will also be playing a Minnesota mom. So like that's kind of part of the shtick, is that it's going to be sort of like Medea, Tyler Perry, or Eddie Murphy, Nutty Professor, where like we're not going to talk about the fact that I'm a man in drag. You know, it's just I'm accepted as a Minnesota mom, and we're killing our husbands. So
Louis Anderson.
Louis Anderson, another one, yeah.
Yeah, or it's never acknowledged, but it's perfect. Yeah, that's cool.
So I'm excited.
I think you should do it in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I want to. I 100% want to. So, yeah.
It's just,
But it's a feature, and why do I keep writing features?
I don't know. You talk about it in therapy, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. So you're in your second decade in Los Angeles. You've made a handful of films, and you're learning something new off of each film, and you're perfecting your craft. If you could go back and give advice to 22-year-old, 21-year-old Levi moving out to Los Angeles, if there's one piece of advice you could pass along, what would you give?
Be an advocate for yourself. I think that something that I've struggled with is compromising for other people. And I think like it's led to a lot of hurt feelings or relationships ending, or, you know, and I think that, and I know like it stems from like the codependency in my parents' relationship. So, like I sort of have carried that with me. So it's like, learning to be an advocate for myself, and, but also like let the struggle happen, you know, because like I think I am a better artist because of that struggle, you know, if that makes sense. I hope that's not like sadomasochist. Like that sounds a little like, you know, but yeah.
No, I think that's amazing advice. I think that's great.
Yeah, I do too. I've found as an actor, and just a filmmaker, an artist, whatever, it's important to let the struggle happen.
Yeah.
It's also important to not take advantage of that, you know, like, oh, I have to relive, you know, my days as an addict to play this addict, you know?
Yeah, no.
And, so that's not for you, but for any listeners, like, you know, just, let the struggle happen, but don't take advantage of it.
Yeah. In moderation. Like, yeah. Like, be an advocate for yourself, I think is the big one. And don't wait around like that. Like I'm grateful that I feel like pretty early on, I was like, I need to start making stuff. And we did, you know, we like the three of us started that production company and made films because we didn't want to sit around. So I think that it's also just important for you to just fucking do it, you know?
Please
even if you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Absolutely.
Oh, don't swear?
No, I'm kidding.
It's been, we're at the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
It's just been.
Pretty sure I've dropped a few F-bombs.
So. We got to start over now. All right.
Yeah.
What's on the horizon for you?
Hopefully getting into more festivals. We have submitted to quite a few, and then I still have more that I will be submitting to. It's just I'm sort of doing like a rollout submission process. So hopefully we'll get into more festivals. I've also submitted to horror film reviewers to hopefully like bulk up our marketing stuff. I would love to have a finished script of the next project that I am writing. It's called Till Death Do Us Part. And that's the Minnesota one. So
I'm excited for that one.
I am so excited to do a comedy. Because Jesus, you guys, it is hard to live in something like Paralysis as long as I have. So I'm excited to do a comedy.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a long time. It was a long time.
2 years.
Writing, shooting, and then living with it as an editor. That's an incredibly long stretch with one project.
And on top of that, to go through a breakup, and then on top of that, like what's going on with my dad's health. Like, it's been a lot. So I'm excited to do something lighthearted, but still spooky.
Hell yeah.
I love it, man. So, plug some of your stuff. Where can we find you?
Sure. I am on Instagram at Levi Austin Morris. Paralysis is also on Instagram at Paralysis the Film. You can also find both of those things on Facebook. Same at.
Well, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming in and talking with us about this.
Absolutely.
It's really impressive what you've built with this. And
I appreciate that.
It's something that you're far braver than me for doing something on this scope and this scale, and especially with an iPhone. And also, like you need an extra round of applause for doing something that is so personal and putting your heart out there and dealing with themes of trauma and forgiveness. So thank you for not just coming here today to talk with us, but also for sharing your art with us.
Sure.
It was really wonderful.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love you guys.
I can't wait to see what's next. I'm hoping it's a project in Minnesota, because that would be it. That would be so much fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. Hope so.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Levi.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Love you, buddy.
Love you.
Love you.